Welcome, everyone. My name is Mike McQueen, and you are listening to the podcast For the Love of Libraries. And in this podcast today, I have Dr. Jeremy Owoh. Did I say it right?
That's correct.
Oh, Lordy, I'm so sorry. I kind of panicked there for a second to make sure I pronounce it right. Thank you for joining us. Can you kind of introduce yourself a little bit and help us know a little bit about what your background is and what you're about?
Sure thing, Mike. I'm glad to join you today. Jeremy Owoh, Superintendent of Jacksonville for Jacksonville, Superintendent for Jacksonville North Pulaski School District in Jacksonville, Arkansas, right outside Little Rock, Arkansas. We're the home of Little Rock Air Force Base. One of the unique things about my district is that our schools were once part of an existing school district. And almost 10 years ago, we were detached from them and started off as a brand new school district. And since then, we have been paving the way for our scholars. We've built all brand new schools,
Mm,
which has given us the opportunity for all new instructional material, all new instructional technology. And we have implement wall-to-wall college and career academies at our high school. And so
mm,
definitely thankful for the commitment and the support here in Jacksonville. This is my going into my fifth year as superintendent.
okay.
Before that, I worked in Little Rock School District as deputy superintendent, and then before that, as the assistant commissioner for educator effectiveness and licensure at the Arkansas Department of Ed. But before that, I was here in Jacksonville as assistant superintendent when we started the school district, and so it's kind of full circle.
Okay. Oh, that's so cool. What a great various assortment. And tell us a little bit about ISTE and ASCD. You're involved with them as well.
Yes, so I was fortunate when I was deputy superintendent in Little Rock to join the ASCD board, and shortly thereafter, we started the process of merging ISTE and ASCD, which was a game changer because ASCD dealt with a lot of content knowledge, instructional leadership support, and ISTE has always been known as the powerhouse for educational technology. And as a superintendent, those are the both sides of my house,
Mm,
educational
hmm.
technology and curriculum instruction and leadership. And so to bring those two major organizations together have been a game changer for the educational environment. And so as I continue to work on the board, as we transition to ISTE ASCD, I moved up to secretary and then got the chance to be president-elect, and January 1st of this year took over as president. So for the next 2 years, or a little less than 2 years now, I'll serve as president of the board of directors for ISTE-ASCD. So we're looking forward to our first co-located conference in San Antonio in a couple of months. Well, in less than a couple of months, and almost a month from now, in San Antonio, where we will have ISTE Live and the ASCD annual conference at the same time, but with some of the events happening together.
Yeah, it's quite an event. I'm excited. I'll be there too. By the time this airs out, it'll probably be over with because I'm going to collect a handful of these interviews first and then publish
Okay,
them later this summer. So I
good.
hope that's okay.
That's fine.
Um, okay, tell us a librarian story of this podcast is called For the Love of Libraries. So it's not just even really about the institution, it's more about the librarian. So do you have a fun, good memory of anyone that librarian or?
I do. So one of the things that I haven't shared with you, Mike, was that I'm a former English teacher. I taught
Oh,
ninth and 10th grade English,
okay.
but my love and passion for reading and literature happened when I was very young,
Hmm.
even pre-teen. My mom would always take us to the local library, and the librarian there. she always asked, and this is when we had the card catalog. So she taught us how to
Me
find
too.
our books based on the card catalog. But she would always ask us, my two brothers and I, our interests. And back then, when I first started, it was the Boxcar Children,
Oh
the
yeah.
Hardy
Yep.
Boy series, and then when I became a teenager, started to graduate to Stephen King type books, and now I read a lot of John Grisham and James Patterson for pleasurable reading. But I remember those early years of just being spending summer times, holidays in the local library, and just seeing the different variety of books, but being engaged in those and how those texts led to my creativity, my passion to pursue a career or a profession in education and
Mm,
English, to be
mm,
exact. And it all started from those early years and just the individualized attention that the media center, well, back then the librarian took with us, and then my school librarians at that time, and even my English teachers, the time that they devoted and really grew that passion, initiated and grew that passion for reading
mm.
in us.
Yeah, oh, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing. All right, so this podcast is kind of focused, at least in the early days of the podcast, is going to all be kind of focused on AI, or generative artificial intelligence. Can you give us a little bit of a backstory to what is the status in your school district now with AI? Like, where are you guys at? Where have you come from, maybe, and where are you at right now?
So, Mike, I'll tell you, I have the benefit with me serving on the ISTE+ASCD board of having direct contact to one of the leading leaders in ed tech, which is our CEO, Richard
Yeah.
Culata. And he actually did about 2 years ago, he did a school visit, site visit here with me, and we toured our schools. And he met with my team, and we
Mm,
looked at our technology policy, and I didn't really think about it until we just started having communication, and he met with my instructional technology coordinator. And he said, a lot of districts have a lot of don'ts. Don't do this, don't do
hmm
this, don't do this, and not a lot of acceptable use. How can you use innovative technology? And, on the wave of generative AI, how can we promote acceptable use at the student level, but also at the staff level? And so he had done some work with LA Unified, revising their technology policy, and he started to work with us. And so about a couple of years ago, we went through the process with our board and team here to revise our technology policy so that we could promote the acceptable use,
mm,
the effective use of innovative technology like generative AI. And so now we have a proactive policy. And one part of that work is really making sure we provide professional learning to our media center specialists, to our tech team here, to our leaders, so that they can provide the support to our educators. So, one, our educators know how to use it effectively from the lens of teaching, but also how they can promote the acceptable use and the comfort for them to be comfortable with our young people, our scholars using it as well. So, how do they
mm,
teach our young
hmm
people how to use it, and how do they become comfortable with our young people in using generative AI or other innovative technology tools in the classrooms, when to use it and when not to use it?
And you mentioned your instructional technology specialist. Kind of, you guys followed a somewhat of like a train the trainer model, right? That person worked with your media specialists, and now as part of the vision, can you talk a little bit to the vision of the role of your media specialists with AI and their staffs and
Yeah,
students?
so
And
we are definitely we have an aggressive plan to ensure that our media center specialists are the specialists in technology innovation or innovative technology. And so our instructional technology coordinator has been working, training, and providing support to our media center specialists on how to become the experts in the buildings so that they can also, in turn, support our teachers as they provide the implementation of innovative technology with our young people and just throughout the course of the day. And so we're actually taking our media center specialists to ISTE so that they can continue to learn
Yeah,
more.
that's right.
And so we could be proactive because one of the things we wanted to always do is be ahead of the curve. Lesson learned when COVID hit a few years ago, that we were not technology savvy as we thought we were,
Yeah,
even though we
that's.
were one-to-one
Hmm.
in technology, but that did not mean anything when it came to pivoting to remote learning and really immersing ourselves in innovative technology. So we don't want to be in that spot again. And so
Mm,
we've been really proactive in making sure our media center specialists are comfortable, they're trained, they have ongoing professional learning on how to implement innovative technology, but also how to think beyond what they even see now. And that's one of the reasons why we're taking them to ISTE so they could see all the possible innovative technology. And then with me being there, with our principals being there, with our instructional technology coordinator being there, all the major players who make the decisions financially and just instructionally are there to have conversations on site during the conference so that we're able to make decisions
mm.
and no one has to wait till they get back to school or when schools start to say, "Oh, I learned this great idea," but then they only remember portions of it. But we're able to have those well-informed conversations there on site. And so our goal is to be really proactive in making sure that we provide support up and down the educational chain here in our district.
Well, a big piece to that, I mean, I'm just so happy to hear you say that you're doing that and the role that your media specialists are playing throughout your district. And the reason to me like is just so important is because AI, like there's so much to it. It
Mhm.
changes so fast. It's complicated, and it's still there's still like a lot of people that are afraid of what's coming and what's happening right now and all these things, and that fear can be extremely, debilitating, especially if you don't have leaders above you that are pushing you for it. I think that can you talk a little bit about that? Like, what role does fear play? Because I know that a lot of teachers and a lot of students, there's just a lot of people that are afraid, and how do you address that?
Yeah, Mike, I think the fear, the confusion, the nervousness that come with that is because it's unknown and
Mm,
there are gaps that are not being filled and I feel like that's where the leaders come in. Like one, I need, as a superintendent, I need to make sure I completely understand generative AI and the do's and the don'ts, the possibilities
yeah.
that are out there, and it's ongoing learning. And so I'm always in some type of seminar or webinar learning just the updates because like you said, it's vast, it's quickly changing because I know, like, for example, Chat GPT, the capabilities that we had with Chat GPT in July of last
Uh-huh.
year has completely changed
Yeah.
now. You could do so much more. And so really thinking outside the box. For example, I was telling one of our art teachers, my curriculum instruction team, we are afraid of generative AI because one, we don't understand it. But when you look at the possibilities of advancing inquiry and problem solving with our young people, AI is the most beneficial tool that we can have. For instance, you can still have students to create original piece in art, but also have them to write a prompt to with the same ideas or assignment and launch it in generative AI tool or another AI tool and have that the tool create and then have them to do compare and contrast their original piece with the uh, AI generated piece, and then that's a different type or a different level of inquiry, a different level of problem solving, the critical thinking, and that's really when you think about what schools should be. We're not really we shouldn't really be teaching almost just the content, more so the strategy, the critical thinking behind those
Mm-hmm.
things, because we're preparing them for life after high school. Either they go into the workforce, either they go to a technical school or 4 year. What are those skills and that's I think what teachers, what educators have to look at now and not and get out of the realm of teaching Macbeth as Macbeth
Yeah.
versus how do we teach critical thinking? How do we teach problem solving? How do we teach these important skills that our students can build upon at the next level? And so, really making sure we fill those gaps of understanding the possibilities of AI, giving them examples, and then don't do a one size fits all. That's one of the things that
Mm-hmm.
I completely do not agree with
Mm-hmm.
providing professional learning to our educators, to our team members, is just doing a one size fits all because
Yeah.
all of
Yeah.
our educators are at different levels. And
Mm-hmm.
so some are probably at the advanced level and some are at the beginning level. And so really making sure we have a proactive professional learning plan so we can meet the needs, the ongoing needs, and it's not a one and done. So
Mm-hmm.
it's ongoing, and we're updating our training as though these innovative technology tools are updated and as they advance. And so making sure we're filling those gaps so that that worry, that hesitation is not there. Because
Mm-hmm.
when there are gaps, people fill it in themselves. And that's when confusion, that's where the lack of trust is built in, and sometimes overwhelming because you're feeling like you're working in a siloed
Mm-hmm. Like a
arena, and
vacuum.
so yeah, vacuum, and so we have to do what we need to do at the district level and supporting the work that happens at the school. So.
Well, there's so much talk about how AI is going to change, everything, the world of work,
Mhm.
how education. When you mentioned teaching Macbeth, I know of high school English teachers that still teach the same exact books that, from 30 years ago or 40 years ago that have been doing the same thing. This whole need to focus more on personalized learning, kind of that's kind of what you're talking about too with professional development. So, what do you think is going to be the biggest hurdle that is going to face, let's talk about librarians. What's going to be the biggest hurdle that's going to face librarians as far as being adaptable and adapting with education, with the focus of teaching and learning from a librarian's
I really think
perspective?
our media center specialists, our librarians, have a very key role in moving education forward because the media center is really the technological hub of the school. And so if they continue to advance, and I have a middle school librarian, media center specialist is top notch, and she's always thinking outside the box.
Yeah,
And
I was
so
asking you about her. Can you, like my questions before we started this kind of related to her specifically. So can you share a little bit about like what is it about her that kind of stands out and what makes you say that?
Well, one, because, and I first worked with her husband when I was an assistant principal. He was my teacher, but I think he taught math, but he had that technology side. And then we eventually both worked at the Arkansas Department of Ed, and he's still on the technology side, and he does a lot in cybersecurity. So the wife, Mrs. Killingsworth, who works here in the district, always communicates back and forth with him. And in fact, when I go to her media center, she always said, "Well, Jeff told me this. Jeff told me this." And so she's staying immersed and growing in the latest technology. And so when it comes to providing resources and supports to our young people at the middle school, she's right there. She's on the
Hmm.
cusp of what's happening. And that's what the media center specialists, our librarians, I think that's the opportunity that they're going to have as we move forward in education with these innovative technology tools. They're going to be able to be that resource of what are the options. It's just not hard now. As an English teacher, I always say we need our hard copy books, but we also know our students are learning differently. And so, what are some of
Hmm.
the other options that we could have to promote literacy, promote research, things of that nature? Because, and this is one of the reasons why teachers are nervous, because students don't have to go to an encyclopedia like we did. They don't have
Right.
to go to hard copy text to research
Hmm.
a topic. They don't have to manually write an essay. So now we're going to have to look at, well, really, what are the skills that we really want our students? And it has always been not to write a research paper, but to understand the components that make up a
Hmm.
research paper. And so it's going to cause educators to really think about what we're truly teaching and why we're
Hmm.
teaching it. And our media center specialists could be those resources at the school level.
Hmm.
And so it's going to be really important that they continue to grow in their area and be those, because our here in our district and statewide in Arkansas, our media center specialists are still required to teach certain classes when
Hmm.
the students come to the library. And so that's the opportunity to really talk about innovative technology, the latest technology, and how that works within the libraries that we have in our schools.
Yeah, you mentioned the Mrs. Killingsworth. My wife teaches fourth grade, so it's the same. We feed off of each other. We
Hmm.
kind of there's a certain level of knowledge gaining that happens when your spouse is similar to the same topics and everything. Um, you mentioned adapt when we were talking about adapting. You mentioned the changes. One of the things I wrote about my book was how the days of Googling and the days of searching the internet is changing too. Like how that looks is completely different. I started learning using Perplexity AI, when ChatGPT was popular, but at that time, ChatGPT and Gemini from Google, they didn't really do a good job at first of integrating search into their results, right? So Perplexity hit it right away. So I was just like, oh my gosh. Now, there were issues, there were mistakes, and but I've done it. I've been so intense with it this last year to see the changes in the growth and how much better it's gotten. And now all the tools, have different types of models too, right? And there's even deep research models. I mean, holy cow, when that came out I first saw it in November, and then they quickly all kind of added that ability even to see how that's improved. You type in a question, and not only do you see a well-written summary of the information with sources cited, but it also is like finding, I think the latest one I did it searched and read 300 different web pages within seconds. And then when it cited those sources, they were all like from reliable sources. I mean,
Right.
I couldn't check them all, but the ones that I checked, I kept seeing more and more like just an improvement. And what a shift that is in learning.
Mhm.
Um, we don't really know what that's going to entail, like the details of it, but how we find information and on how we analyze it. You mentioned like critical thinking, like how we teach kids to ask the right kind of questions and then to guide through the information at face value instead of always having to rely on you know, one source to give the best information. It's tricky.
Right. And Mike, I'll tell you, you mentioned how to ask the right questions. And that's, I think, is going to what some educators are afraid of is giving the students the opportunity to ask the questions and them
Hmm.
not knowing the
Oh
answer.
yeah, that's it. That's a
But
big
that's part of
takes.
learning though.
Hmm.
I mean, when we talk about students taking ownership of their learning and the teacher takes the facilitator role, then you have to admit, I don't know all the answers, but I know where we can get it. So
Hmm.
let's learn it together. Because the teacher should always be the facilitator of learning,
Hmm.
but true learning happens
Hmm.
when that student takes ownership and
Yeah.
has that inquiry of, I wonder if it does this, it's just
Hmm.
like Chat GPT or Gemini or all of these other. I wonder if it does this. What if I ask this prompt, change this prompt and
Yeah.
connect? And but I was talking to quick story. I'm sorry, but I
Sure.
was
No,
talking
no.
to
Stories are
the
good.
vice president of a major factory here. We just had a new factory here in Jacksonville to open, and we were touring the building. And I'll tell you, our understanding or what we thought about a factory 20, 30 years ago of being dark, being dirty, is completely changed
Hmm.
because they're already using AI. And so a lot of the techs, and this is an ammunition company. So you go in and the techs are pushing buttons and the machines are running. And if there's a malfunction, the system shuts down on its own. The tech goes and puts button and it starts back up. Those are what people had at one point in life thought factory jobs would look like. But that the vice president
Hmm.
told me in 5, 10, 15 years from now, factory jobs are going to be non-existent for what we knew that they were or the way that they were when we were growing up because now what our kids and their kids are going to be put in front of them or what they're going to have to do is be able to think past AI and think of like if AI can do this or if this innovative technology to this, how can I get this output? If we put this in, if this is an input, then and so it's more creative,
Hmm.
outside the box thinking that our young people are going to be have to be prepared to do, which means our educators
Hmm.
now need to start shifting the way we teach them so that
Yeah.
they're prepared for those jobs outside, when
Of
they
whatever it might
finish
be.
12th grade year, for whatever they may be. But it's
Hmm.
more that critical thinking, that creative
Hmm.
thinking, that innovative thinking, and not just that remote learning that
Yeah.
we've been taught to do. Two
Yeah.
plus
Yeah.
two will always equals four, but is that really going to help them?
Yeah.
Because I can put that equation into AI and I already have the answer.
I wonder if you would agree with this. Like when I think back to my career, I mean, I'm approaching what 28 years now, and I've worked in a lot of schools and a lot of different environments, and all the best teachers, um, the really best teachers, they all seem to like do an exceptional job at um, getting the students to own their learning, showing that they're vulnerable with technology when they didn't know stuff, like learning together. It
Mhm.
takes trust. The best teachers could do that in a way that the students um, could trust each other to show when they didn't know stuff. And then the teachers that, from my experience, the ones that struggled the most to get kids to grow and to learn were the ones that felt they had to be up in front of the class. Everyone always had to be listening to them all the time. They didn't like to give up control quite a bit. Maybe they were insecure about classroom management or whatever. But that style of teaching, um, it just wasn't effective, especially with some of the more struggling students, compared to the teachers that like empowered their students. And with the impact that AI is having, that has to be a switch, I think, for people because AI is just having so much more of an impact, especially if we want our kids to be ready when they leave.
Well, and it's true. I agree with you, Mike, because, and I've always asked my teachers when I was a principal, but now I ask my principals as superintendent, are we so concerned about teaching the content or are we teaching our students? Because if we're teaching our students, one, we're going to take into account their interests, their level of engagement. where they are in the subject matter, what, we're going to assess their learning along the way. But if we're just standing in front of them teaching the content, it's that's not teaching the kids. The teachers,
Yeah, yeah.
students are not learning, and so they have to have that ownership, and it has to be a shift in thinking. But you're right, when students have been able to be in charge and take ownership of their learning, one, they retain more, and two, they have more memorable experiences with that teacher. And you hear more students talk about the teachers who've had the most impact on them were the ones who gave them the opportunity to grow
Hmm.
academically, to
Hmm.
grow behaviorally, to grow socially in their classroom, and they still learned a lot. And that's, to me, I always tell people that's where the relationships come from. You have to take time to build those relationships, get to know the students need to be able to get to know their teacher, the teachers need to be able to get to know the students, and then effective learning happens after that. But you can't really have impactful learning without those relationships and being
Hmm.
able to build the type of instructional atmosphere where students feel and know they're part of that instructional setting.
Yeah, yeah. I just appreciate it. You have so much in common with the our thinking as far as the best way that kids learn, and it just takes courage to change something that you've been doing the same way before, that used to work before, and then to acknowledge that maybe things have to change. That's not easy for a lot of people, and it's only going to become a bigger need. Let's transition into, we have two more topics, and then we'll finish it up here. I've been really passionate most of my career about project-based learning. Uh, you know, can you speak at all to the role that AI might play with project-based learning? Is that something that some of your teachers are kind of like pioneers with, or?
Yeah, we are. So we have a couple of classes. One a lot in a lot of our career tech classes, which is pretty much project based. The students are able to utilize those tools, AI, to really gather ideas and to find. And that's why I'm
Mm,
saying the content. So much time the textbooks have their place, but when we talk about just basic information that students need to know to move forward, and that teachers could save time in teaching. AI, any type of innovative technology could really help them to do that. Like even instructional instructions, how to set something up or how to build this, or um, what goes great with this topic, or how to, set up an outline, things that you can easily use innovative technology and the time is saved. And so
right,
when
right.
we talk about project-based learning, it's innovative technology, AI definitely have a place with that, and it helps move our students through the process quicker and more effectively, but also it saves times for teachers so you can cover more skills, more concepts by being willing to bring that in. And so a lot of my career tech educators are more apt to use AI or innovative technology because they do a lot of project-based learning to
Hmm.
begin with. And I even think about my music classes, my band classes. You know,
Mm,
that's a concept that has never been really thought of, because I remember my band teacher having to transpose music. He would have it in one instrumentation, and then he would spend time in and time, I mean, day in and day out of transposing it to meet the other instrumentations in the classroom. Well, you don't have to do that anymore.
mm.
I
Yeah,
mean,
right.
all you have put that into an innovative technology tool, and it generates the parts for everybody. And showing our students, when we think about students who are becoming or would like to be musicians or instrumentalists, moving on, um, teaching them how to write music using innovative technology. That's a
Yeah,
skill.
right.
And I mean, so those are the type of things that we're working on now, and really encouraging our teachers to really think about outside some of the things that would normally take a lot of time. and slow down the learning process, we can get past quickly. Even when you think about lesson plans. So, how much
Mm.
time do teachers really take to develop those lesson plans during the summer or during the weekends? And they can produce it right there. And it has
Yeah,
the
yeah.
opening, the middle, the closing, and everything that they need, and they can continue to revise it. And so I just think that it has a lot, especially when you talk about project-based learning. Innovative technology is definitely a game changer for that, for both the student and the teachers.
And librarians are well suited for project-based learning too, because there's different models in different districts and different schools about the role that a librarian might play, but it's not uncommon for teachers to excuse me, either collaborate with the librarian on a project or
Mhm.
pick their brain or, do some kind of professional development that empowers the teachers to be able to do something that relates to the project. So it's just, I just think project-based learning can be a great tool to integrate AI with.
I
All right,
agree.
last question. What advice would you have for a new or aspiring librarian? So someone that just is getting started in the career, or they're thinking about becoming a librarian. What advice would you have for
I would say continue to think outside the box.
them?
Continue to always explore the possibilities. Always remember that the Media Center, the library, is a source of creativity, innovation for our young people, and a source and a resource of innovation, creativity for our educators. And so, continue to look at how can you take this opportunity of advancing education by ensuring that the latest technology, the latest innovation is at the fingertips. And a lot of times, all you need to do is make sure you have computers and your up-to-date computers or laptops in your media center and explore the different tools that are available at your fingertips. But
Mm,
continue to learn. We always talk about lifelong learners. More importantly, these days, our media center specialists, our librarians, really need and our leaders need to continue to learn because
mm,
as we discussed earlier, technology is changing. Like it's not even a month to month, and it's always developing. And one of the great things about AI is that it's not stagnant. You can generate a prompt in AI today and get one result and generate it 2 days from now, and you get a completely different result. And so it's always advancing. And so we need to continue to have that type of mindset. How do we continue to advance so that we can continue to make sure our students are advancing and
mm.
that they're prepared for life after their 12th grade year?
I appreciate that so much because, the more librarians can do that, especially becoming leaders in their school, the more valuable they
Mhm.
are, and the more, meaning they can get out of their jobs, especially for someone that's new to start off that way. Because, I mean, there's always budget cuts and there's always this concern that, things are going to get eliminated or whatever. And if you're considered indispensable by your community, it makes it easy to argue to keep positions and to try new things and to take risks with learning and other new ideas that might come to play. So, all right. Well, listen, thank you so much. I can't wait to meet you in person this summer, and thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for the time. I enjoyed it and looking forward to meeting you this summer as well.